Welcome everyone to Chapter 6, Learning and Adaptation. In this chapter, again, I'm going to talk about things in a little bit of a different order than your textbook, but all of the information should be the same. So if you want to follow how the textbook goes, then you'll have to wait a little until I post all the videos, or you can just follow along here. So in learning and adaptation, we're going to mostly cover about different types of learning and then how we adapt to those different types of learning. So the first thing you need to know is what is learning. So learning is a process by which experience produces an enduring change in an organism's behavior or capabilities. In other words, learning is just a way of kind of training someone's behavior, whether it's your own behavior or someone else's. And again, there's multiple different ways of doing this. And how we measure learning is by changes in performance. So this could be like a test in a class, or this could be in a game in sports. You know, people that the winning team probably learned more. Usually we do this by test, but again, it can be by other measures of performance. So when a baby's learning to walk, then we kind of have the crawl stages to walking to running. So we know that a baby's fully learned to walk when they can run. And so that's kind of how we measure that mechanism of learning. So those are just some examples, and I'll be putting lots of examples throughout this class so that you can follow along to which type of behavior is associated with different types of learning. Now, I keep talking about these different types of learning. We're going to talk about what we call the big three. So these are three main ways of learning. And I've ordered them this way because I think it goes from easiest to understand to most complicated to understand. So I really want to ease you guys in. So we're going to start with event-alone learning. So this is also called habituation. And I think this is the easiest one to understand. It's also the easiest type of learning. So we're going to start here. And then next lecture, we're going to move on to type 2, which is event learning. And so this is also called classical conditioning, or you might have heard of Pavlovian conditioning. And then the final type of learning we're going to talk about is behavior event learning. And this one's a lot more complicated, so that's why I'm saving it for last. And this one's called either operant conditioning or instrumental conditioning. They're interchangeable, so they're the same. They mean the same thing. So, like I said, we're going to talk about these three. We're gonna have 1 day on habituation, 2 days on event, and another 2 days on the behavior event learning. So let's get into it. So again, the first one we're going to talk about is our event-only learning, which can be also talked about as habituation and sensitization. So what is habituation? Habituation is the process by which we respond less strongly over time to repeated stimuli. So it's a decrease in the strength of response to a repeated stimulus. Okay, so it's not the same as sensory adaptation. Remember, we learned about that previously. So it's not the same as that. Habituation is a simple form of learning through repeated presentation. So the more you experience something, then you learn, and so you change your behavior. Whereas sensory adaptation, then the information is still available if it becomes relevant. Okay? So we actually see habituation across all different types of animals in the animal kingdom, from humans to dragonflies to sea snails. And so we can actually study habituation in all of these different animal models. So habituation is, again, a biological mechanism of habituation is a biological mechanism, and habituation itself was actually first discovered in the sea slug by Eric Kandel. And what he did was he looked at the sea slug itself and then looked at how it changes its behavior in the movement of its gills when poked. So the more you poke it, the first few times it's going to react a lot, and then over time it's going to stop reacting as much because it's learned that poking it isn't like a bad thing. It's not a dangerous thing. So it's learned how to respond to that. I have added a fun YouTube video in the comments of this slide if you wanted to watch more about it. But I'm not going to ask you too much about the sea slugs for the exam. So now let's talk about sensitization. So sensitization is an increase in the strength of a response to a repeated stimulus. So this is kind of like the opposite of habituation. Habituation, you kind of get used to something, so you respond less, whereas sensitization is you become more aware of it. So this can result from repeated presentations of a stimulus or by arousal from external stimuli. So again, this is an increase in the strength of response after repeated stimulation. So let's talk about kind of the differences in sensitization versus habituation. So in this figure here, then on the left, this left graph, then this is showing habituation. So the more we have tones, so after about 2 tones, so here we have the number of tones, and this is the startle response. You can see as we get more tones, the startle response decreases because we've learned or we've habituated to the tones. We've gotten used to it, and we've learned that we don't need to be scared of it. We've learned to kind of just hear it and be like, okay, that's cool. And then on the right side here, then again, we've got a different number of tones, but this is showing sensitization. So we hear a tone, and then the more tones we hear, we become more sensitized to it, or we react more, even though the sound, the loudness or whatever of the sound is the exact same. So we're reacting more to the same stimuli over time. So you can see how habituation and sensitization are the opposite of each other. And this can also be a form of learning, because habituation, we hear something and we kind of learn not to be scared of it. You can think of it like that. Whereas sensitization, we hear something and we learn that we need to respond more to it. So this could even be like when you're learning your name as a baby. The first few times you hear your name, you're not really going to respond. But over time, you're going to learn to respond to your name. So you're going to respond more and more to the same stimulus as before, which is your name, because you've slowly learned that that's your name, that that's something to respond to. Now the stimulus specificity. It's a hard word to say, guys. It's a Monday. But pretty much what we're saying is that there's a specific meaning that your habituation is to one particular stimulus. So habituation is highly specific to a specific sound, whereas sensitization isn't quite as specific. So for example, here we've got an example or a cartoon of habituation where we've got a cat living around a bunch of machines, and they're very scary. When you first hear a machine, super scary. But as the cat kind of lives around these machines, the sound isn't as startling. So they're starting to grow on the cat, and then they're no longer bothered by the cat or by the sound. So they've learned over time that these loud machines aren't scary, that they don't need to be scared of them. Now, these are like tractors and forklifts. Now, if you suddenly brought, say, a fire truck around, this cat's going to go back to step one because he habituated to the sound of these machines, not to a loud sound of, say, a fire truck. So habituation is very specific to a certain type of thing. However, sensitization is not specific. So say you have a cat and we're looking opposite. So a cat is fine around tractors and then over time is starting to learn more and more tractors and machines are around that, oh, hey, these can cause damage, these are scary, so they're going to eventually become scared. Now, if you bring in a fire truck now, the cat's still going to be scared. It's going to have the same response to a fire truck than it would to these machines because sensitization is not specific to the stimuli, usually. So this is kind of all I really want to cover today. Like I said, we're going to ease into learning because there's a lot of information to cover here and it can get very complicated. So we're really going to walk kind of slowly through this so that you guys are sure to understand. And like I said, always send me any emails you have. In the next few lectures, we'll be talking about conditioning. So conditioning is the type of learning that comes after habituation and sensitization. So this is like active learning. So just a quick intro to this. British philosophers first came up with this idea of conditioning based on the belief that we acquire almost all of our knowledge by forming associations between stimuli. So conditioning is the act of making associations between stimuli, which will then lead to learning. So we see this in simple associations providing the mental building blocks for all complex tasks. So this will be riding your bike, this will be learning in class, this will be learning how to behave in a social setting. Really any and all complex tasks that we have as humans, as animals, because we'll see examples of conditioning in other animals. All of that is based on the forming of a relationship or association between stimuli. So, like I said, in the next lecture, in the next class, the next day, then we will start classical conditioning. And again, if you have any questions on learning itself and habituation sensitization, please do not hesitate to send me an email.